I mean, one particular operation we went on, and this was a very big operation. We had 132 helicopters in the air at once.
That's a huge operation.
Eagle Strike, it was called an Eagle Strike. We picked up from Da Nang, choppers after choppers, and as each chopper fills up, then it takes off, or the whole bank of choppers, and they go at different flight levels. Everywhere I looked from my chopper, I see choppers up to the left, down to the left, in front, behind. It was just a magnificent sight. I'm sorry I didn't. Long, dirty, unwashed bastards that you wouldn't put a bucket of water over if you... they made me very angry. Anyway, but no, it was in St Kilda Road, Melbourne. That's where I began my career with the Australian Secret Intelligence Service. I grew up in Richmond, in a city suburb, in a place called Vaucluse. Yes, in fact, I was 17 when I joined the army. I was 17 and 3 months. I couldn't. As soon as I became eligible, that's where I went. Joined the army.
So what happened after the Armoured Regiment?
Oh, that's different.
Was that around 1957 that you finished up?
Yeah, 1957. It was announced that a new unit was being formed. It was going to be called the Special Air Service. So I volunteered with another chap called Trevor Pidd, who was later become my best man, or our best man. And Trevor and I put our applications in for the Special Air Service.
Why did it appeal to you?
Well, it was out. It was getting out of the Armoured Regiment. Didn't matter, you know, let's try something, because I still had a couple of years to go in the army.
What was the information you were getting back from Vietnam as far as the conflict progressing?
No, not very much really. In fact, I don't think many people thought much of it. Probably the people in higher places could oversee the bigger picture. I don't think we really appreciated what the bigger picture was. But in '63, the company, SAS company, was sent on exercise LIGTAS to the Philippines. Now this is again another indicator. Remember, we'd been to New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, we'd exercised there, we're doing exercise in Australia. We're now shipped as a company, we go to the Philippines.
Well, how much contact would you have with the Americans?
Oh, a lot. Oh, we lived with them. Because first up, when we go to Subic Bay, they allocated our barrack space, but we mixed. You know, certainly with the special forces as such, because the A team, there was a team which I'll get onto shortly. But, you know, I mean, as individuals, Americans are very nice people, and I think generally I like them very much. But of course, it's the same with Australia. You get the mugs, you know, you always get the mugs. But living on Subic Bay, as I said, the meals were different. But I remember, and the first time I've ever seen a discipline that I didn't like, and that was with regard, they had people in the stockade, which was the American soldiers, or Marines, or Navy, or whatever, were prisoners, because they'd stepped out of line, but they were under the American military police. Well, they used to go into the mess hall, and they'd be marched in the mess hall, and they stand behind their messing tables. They would then be directed to get their meal. Everything's done, you know, like a robot. Then they would bring their meal back and they were told to sit, then commence eating, stop eating, out, and then incredible, really tight control. Even to they had one Sunday morning, they had some Marines, they were dressed in their Marine blues, and they ordered them lie down in the water and the mud and the cold, not cold, but in the rain. Made them all dirty, and then they take them back to stockade, change. A bit cruel, I thought, for, supposedly fellow soldiers. I mean, if a bloke's a bad criminal, they used to send them to Leavenworth. But anyway, that was my impression.
Were the Marines equivalent to your sort of training?
No. The Marines, would be, in our day, I reckon our infantry battalions were as well trained, or if not as good as, but better than, the Marines. Maybe different these days. Maybe our training's not as good, but the Marines, they're very, very much professional soldiers, good soldiers. But we dealt with, apart from the Marines, we also dealt with American Special Forces. That was my first contact with American Special Forces. We went to a place in the Philippines called Central. Wally Hammond, a mate from SAS, he and I were sergeants, and we went down to this A-team.
Is this while you're at the base in the Philippines?
Yes, this is
right, gotcha.
Central is the name of a town.
Okay.
And there was an A-team, an American Special Forces team, and they asked anybody of interest to come down. So Wally and I went and spent some time with this A-team, just getting to know their gear. They had lovely gear, good gear, and
better than
their
your
weapons. Gear? Oh yes, I think better than we have.
What was the atmosphere like in Saigon?
As soon as we got off the plane at Tonsanut and just getting off the aircraft, or flying in, we flew in Pan American from Saigon, from Singapore to Saigon was Pan Am. When the fly into Tonsanut Airport, the aircraft would have to come at a very high angle, high altitude and sharp angle, because of any enemy fire coming in from the surrounding areas. So that was our introduction to, and when we're flying into Tonsanut, you could see the reinforcements, the sandbagged areas around the ship, the aircraft hangars were protected and bagged, the fighter aircraft online protected with the anti-mortar shelters, that sort of thing. But I suppose the most telling thing was when I arrived, get off the aircraft, collected our gear, walked out the front of Tonsanut Airport, and here the rows and rows of graves of the French Foreign Legion that had been killed in Vietnam. That really brought back the reality of what Vietnam was about. That was my introduction. But going into Saigon itself, I mean, it was a bustling, busy, Lambretta-driven city. Very, always the smell of car fumes very high in the air. And we were allocated, I say, our quarters of bachelor officer quarters, because at this stage it was decided that all Australians would be either commissioned officers or warrant officers, because it was John Murphy that made the decision that his sergeants, they weren't being properly looked after as such. So all future members of the training team would be officers or warrant officers. So we were allocated to our BOQs, which are Bachelor Officer Quarters. We were very comfortable. I think mine was in the Rex Hotel. The Rex was a very comfortable hotel, beautiful. You could go up top and they'd have a beautiful big bar. You'd never think you're in a war. Big bar, barbecues, steaks that thick for $1 American, large steaks, and they just tell them how you want it done and they would do it any way you wish. And I said to them, where'd these steaks come from? And they were all Australian meat, believe it or not, and you never see it like that in Australia. Beautiful, all the meat. But that was our introduction. And again, because we had to remain in Saigon for allocation out to the outgoing areas where everybody was going to go to, different units, we received further briefings by the Americans. And this went on for 2 or 3 days also. So again, briefing. And you're taking in a lot of information. And it's very hard to assimilate and make an assessment on it all. In fact, you become quite drained of the information you are receiving. But aside from that, we did go around, have a look around Saigon and look at the beautiful villas, you know, villas the French had built, all palatial homes, lovely marble floors and, you know, first-class homes. And there was, I mean, there were a lot of Europeans there in 1964. Not only the French, but the British people were there, Australians, and even our embassy staff. The Australians were there, and they were all very comfortable and lived extremely well. And there was one great restaurant in Saigon. It was called Cheap Charlie's. And that's where most of us, the Australian soldiers, used to go. And you'd have beautiful Vietnamese food, but lovely bowls of soup and great dishes, all for a nominal fee, not much money at all. You know, and very good. You could have good beer. If you like good beer, you'd drink beer La Rue. If you didn't like good beer, you'd drink Bar Mui Bar, which is beer 23. Give you a headache, terrible headache. So I can say that I tried them both. But beer La Rue I thought was quite a good beer. But also you get a lot of the San Miguel beers and other foreign beers.
So what was it like interacting with the Americans during those few days?
I generally very well. In fact, my first introduction on about my first, second or third day there, I forget which, so I was in a bar just having a beer and a young American walked in and said, "G'day, g'day," and would like a beer, because they don't shout. The Yanks, if you say to a Yank, it's your shout, they don't understand. Because if you say, "I'll buy you a beer," they say, "It's good, yeah." And if you say, "Well, what about me?" they say, "What do you mean?" Well, it's your turn. They don't understand, don't have shouts like that. So, well, they didn't. They may have improved. But, so I going talking to this young bloke, and turned out his name was Val Burke. He was a lieutenant in the United States Air Force. He flew C-123 Provider aircraft, which was a little version of the Herc. It was a 2-engine, but it looks very much like a Hercules aircraft. And he was a graduate from the Air Force Academy. Very nice bloke. And we became friends. And he actually sent we had a photograph taken of Val and myself, and he actually wrote a note on the back of a photograph and sent it to Leslie, my wife, and to say everything was going well. And as I said, we became friends. Unfortunately, Val was shot down and killed over Laos, and I think that would have been about 4 or 5 months after we met. And I didn't know he'd been killed until I read it in the United States magazine, or called The Stars and Stripes. And I've still got the the cutout from the Stars and Stripes where he was killed. But I wrote to his wife. I suppose he was killed after the first Australian kill, because while we were in Saigon, or not necessarily in Saigon, but while our first introduction in the country, Kevin Conway was killed in a mortar attack, and he was the first Australian. So really Val Burke was the second fellow I knew that was killed in action, but Conway I didn't know, but he was an Australian, was the first Australian of the training team killed in action.
What was the reaction to his death?
Well, yes, it was of course shocked. I was actually in hospital in Nha Trang, which is up in the centre of South Vietnam, on the coast, beautiful beachside town. And I was at the American hospital there. I'd damaged my knee. And Dalton, there was the captain, came in to hospital. He was wounded, but he was the commander of the A team out in the bush that they were attacked there, and Conway was part of his team. He was the Australian attached to the American A team. And I asked Dalton, how did Conway cop it? He said he was killed within the first couple of minutes of the attack, because what they'd done, the Vietnamese, and I don't know why the Yanks do this, but they allow people within their compounds and confined, so they actually had probably stepped out the measurement directly to that mortar bay to wherever they were going to attack from, and they'd know the distance. So they were able to drop the first few rounds right within that area and nullify the major firepower, being the big 4.2 inch mortar, or 3 inch mortar, whatever it is. It's a 3 inch mortar, I should say, not 4.2, that's a rocket launcher. Yeah, the 3 inch mortar, or 80 millimetre, similar mortar. So yes, as I say, he was, and so we did have a service in Saigon for Conway, and I was part of the burial party. The unfortunate thing was that the casket was actually leaking, and I had, and all our clothes for the burial party, we were carrying the casket, were covered with body fluids, so it was a bit sad. But the nasty thing was that they didn't know where to bury Conway. He was going to be buried in Singapore, he was going to be buried in Saigon. So I'm not sure, I think he ended up being buried in Singapore. But it was again a disgusting thing where government or the higher command didn't know how to react to a death, and yet we were going into a war zone, so it was rather peculiar. But that was, again, just one of the smaller side, disappointing sides of war, with Conway being killed.
Where were you posted from Saigon?
Beg your pardon?
Where were you posted from Saigon?
Oh yeah, well, I was posted to the Ranger Training Centre at Suk Mi, which if you go from Saigon, you go to Nha Trang. From Nha Trang, as I said to you, is a beach resort type town, very nice. But you go inland from Nha Trang to Ninh Hoa, and from Ninh Hoa you go in a bit further to Suk Mi, and Suk Mi was on a river and a nice little just a town. But the compound of Suk Mi, where all the advisors lived, was a big compound surrounded by barbed wire, fire controlled trenches, reinforced bunkers, and main gate, of course, all barbed wire, and guard towers around the place. And it was a French villa with other outbuildings, and that's where all the advisors from the Ranger Training Centre to the civil defence people all came in at night and lived within that compound. Again, I refer back to, we had all Vietnamese staff looked after the kitchen, did all the cooking, all the cleaning, and everything was done. And we had the local ranger battalions would actually offer the defence of that particular compound. The Ranger Training Centre, we had, I think, about 4 Australians and several Americans operated the training centre. The Ranger Training Centre was there to bring in from the field Ranger battalions, retrain them, get them focused on what they're about completely, and generally train them up again to be ready to fight on again. So what we were doing, we were bringing these battalions in from all over South Vietnam, would come through the Ranger Training Centre and go through all the phases starting from platoon, company operations to one final wind-up battalion operation as such. My job, I was supposed to be air coordinator, supervise the training capabilities of the companies and the battalion as such, and generally put on displays and instruct on better application of the use of weapons. And fortunately, I was posted there with Clem Keeley, also an ex-SAS fellow, who again, he became RSM of SAS later on when we went back to Australia. He and I, when the Americans knew we'd been sent to Suk Mi, they actually sent up 2 colonels from Saigon. And these 2 colonels spoke to Clem and I for a day on all of our equipment, took photographs, took notes, and made everything they could with regarding what we thought of equipment, what's best to take into the field, and this sort of thing. And they went back to Saigon, and I believe they went back to America and produced the gear the American Special Forces then used later on. So we were instrumental in helping the Americans from that side on equipment, and what to use.
Just curious.
My weapon, I was issued with an M2 carbine, which is a automatic or semi-automatic 30 calibre carbine. Nice light little weapon, very light. Not much hitting power, but enough at 50 yards to stop somebody, but above that, forget it. And also we used to carry a 45 pistol, Colt, which was a very fine weapon in a crowded lift. No, if you could use it properly, it was a good weapon. But that was being facetious. But we went, having done that, we would train just passing through and wander around the training areas as such. The Australians were instrumental, for example, in setting up firing ranges, jungle firing ranges, which the Yanks had no concept of, which made the Vietnamese a far better soldier in being able to fire his rifle much better and a helper hitting a target. I mean, we set up balloons, because if you get soldiers, if they can hit a balloon, they can know they've hit it because they see it explode. Well, that gives them encouragement. Whereas you fire at a target, You can tell the soldier is hitting the target, but he doesn't really know if he's hitting it. He might think he is, but there again he may not be. So, but a balloon will indicate to him straight away, yeah, I hit that, that's easy, I can keep on doing this. So that shows them a better way of using their weapons. We also changed their method of transportation on their trucks. And of course we got this from Malaya, we learned all this in Malaya. But the sides of a truck, you'll see the seats are all there and everybody's facing inward. So what we did, we changed the seats around, put them in the centre, all facing out. So in case of an ambush, the soldiers could react quickly because they were facing a situation where one side would be able to return fire very quickly into an ambush. Because that's your SOP, you don't try and get through the ambush, you attack the ambush and go into it, rather than throw down your arms and run. So you attack, and that go. And these are some of the things that we showed the Americans. They were greatly appreciative of the way we did things. We do it differently, probably a little bit better. We also had to show them, to give the Vietnamese confidence. We had such things as death slides, jungle bridges, which are very precarious, was a single strand of wire, the wire on either side, and going across the river at 30 feet above the water is not too conducive to a happy landing, But we showed them all these things, and we showed them parachuting. We used to do demonstration drops that took me for the people, for the soldiers, so they could see what we're about, and generally show them air support. I think possibly I felt sorry for the soldiers. They would sometimes miss out in their pay, and they weren't particularly well looked after. All you'd see the big fats are full of rice, and that's about all they'd get. A few vegetables thrown in. And then, of course, there was the way they looked after their prisoners there. The first thing that struck me, I'm talking of their own soldiers, I'm not talking about the Viet Cong. I'm talking about their little cages, and they'd be out in the centre of the sun, just with cage of barbed wire around them, and that's where they'd sit and throw water over them or throw them a feed, and that's how they treated them. I'll just have a drink of water.
Sure.
Getting a bit dry. So, and as I said, we used to just work very closely with the Americans. As I said, we lived in the compound, so you'd come in at night. We had one night, unfortunately, we had 12 Vietnamese killed. They'd hit a minefield outside the training area, and there were 12 killed. And a lot were wounded. We had to medevac them, and that's when an American sergeant, his name was Sergeant, he died. He had a heart attack, and he died. It took me, and they transported him back to Saigon, and that was a bit sad. He was a big man, but he was very active, and I think the strain of trying to evacuate and generally contribute to the evacuation of those soldiers took too big a task on him. But as I said, we lived in the compound itself. Every night we'd sit down and we'd have a few beers, because one of my jobs, extraneous jobs, was to collect money. I think I used to collect about $5 or $10 American a week or a fortnight. We'd all put it in, and if a convoy would go down to Nha Trang, we'd buy our beer, always San Miguel beer. We'd bring back a few crates of that, bring it in, and we'd have a fridge on our veranda. And every night we'd sit down and we call it Uk Dai Loy Alley, which is the Australian advisor for Vietnamese, Uk Dai Loy. But the Yanks thought this was a marvellous idea, so they also joined. So we had the whole alleyway, everybody sitting around at night, used to sit down and have a beer and not bother to the mess until dinner came, for dinner at night. And then, every morning we'd listen to Radio Australia on the short wave, and the Yanks would sit there and listen to the news because they knew the news was reliable and no propaganda, it was good stuff. So, as I say, I spent quite a few months at Zukmi, training and getting to know people. And it was the first time that I actually came under fire. We were doing a battalion shakeout, the final phase of their battalion, and we're in an area past Ninwa. We're out about 16,000 metres. I think we'd probably say 15,500 metres from our guns. And we had a few single shots coming our way at first. We came across a footprint on one of the tracks, and there was a Ho Chi Minh sandal. So we knew there was Vietnamese or Viet Cong around. And then a few single shots started pinging out, just indiscriminate shots, because you get the crack coming over. And then suddenly we're approaching, we had through a paddy field. We're going through a paddy field and then we hit with very heavy machine gun fire from the front. The Yank, I forget his name, he was a captain, American captain. He was the battalion advisor, so he was responsible for that battalion to advise the Vietnamese commander. I was only going along as an advisor, purely to observe, see how the battalion reacted. So we didn't know we were going to be hit with real enemy. Anyway, but the amazing thing was that I did see the machine gun post, and I saw what they were wearing, and they were wearing the pith helmets of the North Vietnamese. So we knew, and it was the first time it was reported, that we had North Vietnamese troops down in the 2 Corps area, which was the Vietnam was into 1, 2, 3, 4 corps, so of operations. I should have probably said that before, but I didn't.
No, that's okay, that makes sense.
So the American Hannenberg or some, I forget I'll think of his name after. He called for Phao Bin being artillery support. I mean, it's not within my realm to do or say anything. But he asked me, he called me over, instead of him coming to me, he called me to him, so I ran to him, and Clem Keeley later got very angry with me. He said, never ever will you go to somebody who called you under fire. If they want you, let them come to you. But anyway, I did. I went to him. He got and asked me if I'd go around the right flank to see if I could see any other enemy or anything likely to hit us from that side. So I went around the right flank, and mind you, I think I might have lost about 5 or 6 kilo, because it was the first time for me, and the pressure of knowing that I'm going into action and knowing that the enemy is pretty close, and going around on my own, not with another English-speaking bod with me to let me know what's going on. But anyway, I went and had a look, and I came back and nothing, I couldn't see anything. And then so we're moving forward again, and suddenly my pack burst open. Now, to this day, whether around it cut all my strapping and everything, but my pack just burst open. Very undignified. I had curry powder, rice, everything floating in the water behind me. And I thought, this doesn't look real swish, does it? So I was able to get rid of that gear and carry on. But that was one part of me where I really say losing weight. That's how I sweat. I started to sweat quite a lot, you know. Anyway, but we rolled on. But what I'm saying is then he called for foul bin artillery fire. So the first round came over and I looked up, I could see it coming very slowly. So we were right at the end of the extent of our guns. I think they were 105s, but they have a limit of about 16,000 metres, I think. We got that round and he sent in a second round for a ranging shot. Then we called fire for effect, which we wanted more rounds to bring to bear on the machine gun posts and whoever the enemy was there. No more artillery came. So we then asked for a Puff the Magic Dragon, a gunship, because by now it's getting dark and we're not sure of the actual disposition of the enemy. So Puff the Magic Dragon was a big DC-3 with machine guns on one side, and they could rain down enormous firepower. They arrived on the scene and put down a bit of fire, but by then the enemy had dissipated because I realised they were up, probably thought we were a smaller force, but then didn't realise we were a battalion. So they broke off contact and went. So really, that was the end of their first engagement, was that night. We stayed, I saw one little Vietnamese soldier die. He had a terrible wound to the chest, just a big gaping hole. He couldn't, breathe naturally enough. We covered it up, tried to cover the wound, to stop the air getting in there or escaping, but he died. And then there were a few other injuries as well. We did take some prisoners. I don't know what happened to them. I saw them once, and I don't know whatever happened to them. No idea. So I suppose, ignorance is bliss. So I can say that. When we got back the next day to the base...
Well, how did you spend that evening in the bush?
Oh, just in a defensive position. That's all. We didn't dig in. They didn't patrol. I mean, if it had been my command, we would have been actively patrolling, going out to search and actually engage again. But they didn't. They just stopped there and that was it. Break off contact. And this was an operational battalion. So, if I was going to be critical, and you can't be critical because you're a diplomat, you're just there. I was just there as an observer, so nothing as to add any influence on the action at all. Hennenberg, I think his name, Captain Hennenberg. He had an aunt in Mont Albert in Melbourne. Funny or not, yeah.
Did he ask you if you knew them?
Oh yes, he did. Yeah, but that's just something I just remembered. He was a nice sort of bloke, but I don't think the Yanks didn't seem to have that at that particular stage to get up and close with the enemy and kill the enemy. I mean, that's what it's about, isn't it? To close with and kill. And anyway, we get back to...
So were you quite frustrated when You set up defensive positions and...
Oh, yeah, you know. But it was good, a weight loss program, I'll tell you. But anyway, when we got back to...
Did you discuss your circumstances with your Aussie mate?
Beg your pardon?
Did you discuss your circumstances with the other Australian fella, Clem?
Oh, yes, yeah, when I got back the next day, of course, yes, yeah. And that's what I'm saying, Clem Keeley, he's a World War II soldier, Clem. I told him what was going on, he said, he got very angry with me, because he said, never ever do that again. He said, if somebody wants you, let them come to you. You don't go certainly under that sort of fire because they're just picking people off. And you don't need to advertise the fact that you're around. But generally I spoke just among ourselves how disappointing it was really for an action which could have, really they should have been able to take them out easily. Instead of calling for artillery was probably not the right thing to do. Calling for a gunship, you didn't need it really. They could have handled the situation themselves and didn't do so.
Sounds like a lack of confidence, perhaps.
Oh yes, yeah, but a lack of wanting to engage and destroy the enemy. That was what they should have been doing. You know? But again, I get back to the fact that when we got back, later I was discussing with the advisor, the American advisor, I said, what happened to that artillery support? Why didn't it continue, you know, when you asked for fire for effect? And he said that the province chief, see this is again another thing they're up against, the province chief didn't want artillery fire near that particular village because he thought it would upset the people. Well, what he was probably saying is, I've got my Viet Cong mates there, I don't want you to upset them and kill them. So that was an indication of what the beginning was or the beginning of the war in '64. And it was from that time on, the Australians were allowed to go, when we got in country, to go operational. Prior to that, they were only purely as a training. But in 1964, the training team became an operational unit as such.
Do you think that was a result of the skills you demonstrated during the training course?
Oh, I think, you know, I think the Americans wanted us to be operational as well because we could certainly influence a lot of their thoughts, and our training or our applications are probably different but very effective. And for our small army, you know, we're pretty skilled people, whereas they have generally a blanket thing because they're a very big army. We are more smaller and probably a lot more adaptable, much more flexible, I think, than the Americans.
Quality, not quantity.
Yes, certainly that, yeah. The Americans who were allocated to the Ranger Training Centre had done the Ranger course at Fort Benning in America. And once they passed the course, they wore the Ranger tag on their side. We didn't have any such...
Paraphernalia?
no, or recognition as
Yeah.
such. But our Recondo course that we'd done was just as tough, as I said to you, as any Ranger course at all. Because remember, L.G. Clark had attended the Ranger course and had become the honour student. And I think there were, as I said, 400 or 500 students on that one course. I mean, numbers far exceed ours. I mean, we talk of 30. The Yanks talk of 300. You know. But the Rangers themselves they were better, or supposedly better, than the normal ARVN soldier, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam soldier. He was a basic infantry. But you know, they struggled hard. They had a good sense of humour, always giggling and shy-acting, but I think they could have been looked after better. Their officers certainly didn't really look after the welfare of troops as we would apply to our own troops.
So things like their food would be less, or
The food would be, they used to prepare big woks full of rice and just stirring the rice. They might throw chilies with a lot of nookmaam, which the nookmaam is a fish sauce, yeah. And you could always smell that. And the body odours were always pleasant, because remember, we were up still in the tropics, and they didn't have access to showers every day like we did. So you'd go into, say, a classroom and you could get the odd smell out, you know. But anyway, that's not being critical, it's just an observation. But generally, no, they performed pretty well. They're good soldiers, yeah.
you were saying also that you could identify them because of some sort of a colour.
Oh, they
badge?
used to wear the Rangers, the Viet Dong was there. They used to wear red scarves, so that would indicate they were the Rangers, so they were a cut above the others, you know. But as I said, they were spread right throughout South Vietnam. But they used to come back for rotational training to Zuc Me and spend a bit of time, re-kit, and out again, you know, into the war zone.
Can you think of anything else about the time at Zuc Me that you had that you want to share with us?
Zuc Me was really, as I say, was a villa. It was very comfortable. We had our own room. We had the boys used to be allocated to clean the rooms, clean all your uniforms, clean your boots, and it was pretty much luxury.
So what was an average day like there?
Well, yes, probably get up 6 o'clock, shower, put on your fresh new clothes, which was, you know, very much well looked after at Zuc Me, and breakfast, then out to the vehicle compound, and a driver would be there with the Jeep. Hop in the Jeep and off you'd go to the training areas, whether it be out on the range or within different training areas in the Ranger Centre itself. But you'd know from the previous day what was going to go on. Well, there again, you may have air operations, in case you may be going to parachute. So the aircraft had come up from Nha Trang, because there was a big air base in Nha Trang, and probably an Otter aircraft, and it would carry the parachutes on board the aircraft. We would then, the Zuc Me airfield was just outside the other side of the village, on the other side of the river, which is about 10 minutes away from the compound itself. And we'd bring the Otter aircraft in, tell him it's okay to land. He'd come in, offload, put the parachutes on, make sure the troops were there to view, and then just put on a display, parachuting display, which they thought was very nice. And except if you landed in the big elephant thorns, big bushes, which were fairly high bush, but they had huge thorns, so you have to keep away from them. So generally you made sure you pulled down on your parachute properly and got away from anything likely to occur like that. It was on one of those demonstration jumps that I had a malfunction, and I had to activate the reserve parachute. In fact, I've got the the handle. The Yanks gave me the handle, so I've still got that reserve handle as a memento of that particular jump. But the American parachute was a beautiful big 32-footer parabolic parachute, which gave you plenty of lift, you know, but when you had a malfunction it wasn't too good. There's a lot of air to get rid of.
So what do? Do you just get rid of the other chute and...
No, in those days, because your main chute, if it wasn't deployed properly, and I had quite a few throw-in lines, which is the line is over the causing the parachute to fold. So I looked at it, I made an assessment, and I thought, well, I'm falling too rapidly. And my assessment was right because my reserve inflated straight away. As soon as I pulled it and threw it out, it went straight up and developed straight away. So that was an indicator I'd done the right thing because I was falling fairly fast. And
what happens to the other chute?
it stayed in that position. But what you're doing, you're keeping your reserve chute away from it. So you've got a sail there and you've got a sail there. But you're getting lift from both. But there's a tendency that if there was a high wind, then you could have a problem. You haven't got any real control. Well, you've got no control. So you're just at the whim of the parachutes themselves. But because of the malfunction, the reserve was flying nicely and really it was a very comfortable ride to the ground. So, but when I got there, the troops all thought that was marvellous, flying 2 parachutes. Yeah.
So you look like a real expert by this point.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, well, I hadn't done many descents really. Probably might have done 20 or 25, 30, I don't know. But not a lot. Maybe 50.
Because that's a pretty alarming moment when you realise things have gone wrong.
Well, no, the amazing thing, you're not alarmed. No, it's all part of the drill comes into play. You know what you're going to do and you do it. If it doesn't work, that's when alarm, I would think.
But thankfully it did.
Yes, yeah. But no, as I say, I've still got that reserve handle. The Yanks made a big deal of it and presented me with the handle because I said, why didn't you throw it away? Well, it's again not our way because the Australians are very frugal. If we activate a reserve, you have to keep hold of that because you have to return it with the parachute.
Really?
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, that was just another day at the Ranger Training Centre in Zookmee. And as I said, I stayed there quite a few months. And then...
Sounds like you enjoyed the time that you had there.
Oh, yes, but it was certainly, apart from one bit of action, it was pretty relaxed, really. Even though it was a war zone, it wasn't a war zone. I mean, I used to... I bought 2 little tape recorders. One I sent home to Leslie and one I kept. And we used to send one another tapes. And that was the electronic message going in those days, and that's 1964. But they work well. I remember talking to her on one tape and we had the monsoon and all the air was totally flooded completely, and but I was talking on the tape and I don't think, I said, do you want to hear this rain? And I think I played it for her. It was deafening. So I'm not sure whether she heard that or not, but maybe. But the Yanks were very generous with their aircraft. For example, I wanted to look at the 2 Corps area. And, you know, I was a warrant officer, that's all. And the Yanks said, yeah, you want to look at the area? We'll show you the area. So they sent up a helicopter plus a gunship, helicopter gunship. And I could ask that pilot to take me anywhere in Tukor. We went all over the Tukor area, having a look right around the joint, up to Pleiku, up around all the operational areas. And, you know, it was just the gunship would go in and make sure everything was right beforehand. We'd go in and land, and then I'd talk to the commanders in that area, then up again, off we'd go again, you know. Very good. And the other thing with the Australian advisory team, we had open travel orders. We could go anywhere in Vietnam at all, just by having, they were written orders, but they completely open travel orders, so we could travel anywhere. Go up to an Air Force base and say I'd like a flight to, say, Trung Lap. And they say, fine, show us your orders, and there it was. And again, the other thing was that we always carried our own weapons, whereas other people travelling on American aircraft had to surrender their weapons before they could get on board. So, no, the Yanks were very good to us. So it was the end of that particular year, 64, that I was dispatched to the north to 11 Ranger Battalion.
Well, how did this come about? Because, I mean, that's a fairly radical change.
What's that?
Well, I mean, you're going from the south to the north into...
Well, we're still within the South Vietnam, below the DMZ. But...
Is this Da Nang?
Hmm?
Is this Da Nang?
Da Nang, yes. I was posted to 11 Range Battalion, which operated from the Da Nang area. And that was an operational battalion. So I went there as a warrant officer advisor. There were two Yanks there. There's a Yank Major and an American Captain Crane. He was hopeless. Absolutely hopeless. He was... my first day, I arrived in Da Nang. I was told that afternoon we're going on an ambush patrol. I said, fine. So I had my gear ready, waiting for a briefing, go to the airport, pick up the chopper, or choppers, and out we fly. Never once did he tell me what we're about, never had a briefing on what we're about. And this fellow is a West Point graduate. And on the way there, we're fired upon, and the helicopter was hit several times, but no damage sustained, just a few holes. But you're not really aware of it. And then we came across a patch of Viet Cong. So he ordered the gunships in to attack them. And I said to him, this is over the headphone, I said, what's your mission? He said, ambush at such and such road junction. I said, you've just stirred up a hornet's nest here. You fired on every bastard that's around the place. You're going into an area very close by, and you're telling everybody you're arriving. I said, you're a dill. Anyway, we go in. We landed, form up in the ambush position, which again he didn't do that very well at all. He hadn't briefed his troops, the Vietnamese. They were pretty casual about where they were going to go, where the killing ground was. There was nothing, no real description.
So he had mostly Vietnamese troops?
Oh, they were, yeah, Rangers.
Right.
Also 11 Rangers, yeah. But a small, just two choppers, say 30 people. Anyway, the briefing, I said, well, okay, we're here now, what are we going to do? He said, we just stay here overnight and then we move out. I said, well, I don't think you'll see anybody anyway. Nobody's going to come near you. They know you're here, everybody knows you're here. And that's what happened, nothing happened. So we walked out the next morning, walked back to the main road and extracted by truck. But it was very annoying, and I was very critical. When I got back, I spoke to George Chin, who was the RSM of the training team in Da Nang, and I said, you know, George, these people don't even know how to brief or give any instructions at all. And I said, I'm not very happy about operating with these people. But there's nothing could be done. I stayed with them. And we had several operations.
Did this cause some friction because the guy in charge you thought was a dill, as you put it?
Oh, yeah, we didn't like one another. Did not like one another at all. I mean, a lot of people think the American systems all, you know, believe in equality or that. But you get people within the American system, if they think they're a captain and you're a warrant officer, they reckon they're smarter than you, even by the written word, not by common sense. And but I just let him know what I felt, that I didn't think he was good enough, and for a West Point graduate he lacked a lot to be desired.
Well, why do you think that he was put there if he was sort of incapable, say, for instance, of giving a brief?
Well, they had to put him somewhere, I suppose. And they put him there, and he was probably, nobody else would report his actions as such, you know. But for other operations, really I was on my own at a company level. I just stayed with the company. I didn't go to the headquarters level. But again, information coming down was really a lack of.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the enemy situation, what the mission was, friendly forces. I mean, one particular operation we went on, and this was a very big operation. We had 132 helicopters in the air at once.
That's a huge operation.
Eagle strike, it was called an Eagle strike. We picked up from Da Nang, choppers after choppers, and as each chopper fills up, then it takes off, or the whole bank of choppers, and they go at different flight levels. Everywhere I looked from my chopper, I see choppers up to the left, down to the left, in front, behind. It was just a magnificent sight. I'm sorry I didn't have my camera. It was just a wonderful thing. So we went in to an area around the TANKER area south of Da Nang, and in we went, and that was a fairly big operation. That was the first time I'd seen napalm used and fighter aircraft in close support.
Well, can you step me through what actually happened that operation?
Well, as I say, we had a lift-off in the afternoon. It was fairly late in the afternoon because we'd been waiting around all morning. We were told we were going on an Eagle strike.
I'll just pause you there because of the phone. Saying that you're up in the air and the helicopters.
Oh, an Eagle strike.
Eagle
yes,
strike.
Yeah. Yes, well, the whole thing is that we're going in there to relieve a battalion, which a friend of mine was Jim Husband. He was the warrant officer advisor with the battalion. So when we landed, we naturally found out, but they were under a very heavy attack, his battalion. So we actually came to their rescue, as you might say.
So was this a rescue operation or was it a previously planned
Well,
operation?
it was supposed to be a sustained attack on the Viet Cong stronghold. And I suppose that they made the assessment that the ARVN battalion would handle it, but couldn't do so with us in reserve. So there were two ARVN battalions and I was with the Ranger battalion. I was the only Australian with them. Again, there was Jock Haig was with another Armoured Battalion, and I didn't know he was with them. And husband, who I didn't know was with that battalion until we arrived there. And coming out of the smoke and the crap, this figure appeared on a paddy bun. "Hello, Jim." And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, well, I'm not sure. I said, "We're supposed to be going that way." And he said, "Well, I'm glad you're going in, I'm getting out." But anyway, after we stayed there a few days, but we actually called in fire support, aircraft with napalm and fighter.
So this is a pretty big
Oh
confrontation.
yeah, it was very spectacular. I mean, it was as if you're at the movies when you see across your front the napalm being dropped, and then the rounds from the aircraft falling on your head. You know, spent cartridges. They get hot. You know, they land on top of you.
What's the terrain like where you're...
Well, this was fairly open, savannah type country. It wasn't jungle as such. It was paddies, and I remember just looking down towards the TANKER itself, you know. No, it was very, I suppose in any other time you'd say it was a nice view, you know. But it was just a lot of smoke, of course, then. Once the napalm starts operating. And
Well, what does that look like in close range, napalm?
balls of fire. Balls of fire. Then everything around it catches fire and destroys anything within that close vicinity, you know. But that, when night came, we withdrew and just actually sat around this hill, and some of the Vietnamese giggled and smoked cigarettes and showing everybody where they were, and I was going around telling them to shut up and watch their front, but it didn't make any difference. But it wasn't until I went to Hong Kong on my R&R that I happened to go down one morning for breakfast in the hotel, and Jock was there. We started talking, and we hadn't realised it, because it's very lonely when you're the only one that speaks English and you've only got schoolboy French and a bit of Vietnamese, and they're all laughing and giggling and carrying on. You don't really know what is going on, and there's nobody else to talk to. It's not good, you know, you don't feel comfortable. But I didn't realise that on the other side of the hill, the Jock was sitting, feeling the same way I did, nobody to talk to. So, but that was another example. But we did several operations, but where you had contact with the enemy, then contact would be broken. So in those early, the 64, 65, there was no real big battles to go on with as such. I mean, some of our advisors in the outlying areas, in the Special Forces camps like Ashow and that, yeah, they used to be pounded a fair bit. Ray Simpson, who later won the VC and DCM and was also SAS, he was wounded, hit in the knee, and I remember going to see him down in Nha Trang. He was in hospital there. But generally the fight was taken to the enemy but not sustained, and it was just simply like backing off.
Did you find that frustrating?
Beg your pardon?
Did you find that frustrating?
Oh, of course you do. I mean, we've got a different attitude. But I mean, for example, the battalion commander of the Vietnamese Ranger Battalion would come out with his troops in the morning, say we're going out on an operation, go out on an operation, and then at lunchtime he'd call up a chopper and off he'd go, and that was the last you saw of him. He was going home to his wife, and his battalion could do what they liked. But one particular operation we went on, it was supposed to be only last, we're told, oh, just a quick search of this village and it'd be all over in a few hours. Don't bother taking rations, nothing. And so all I remember is that I left a tin of beans on my bed. I lived in Da Nang in a hotel and I shared it with an American pilot. He was a forward controller pilot. So we shared the room. In fact, I gave him a 45 Colt pistol in exchange for a flying jacket. He never gave me that flying jacket. If ever I remember his name, he's gone. Yeah. However, anyway, as I was saying, we shared bedrooms. It was comfortable. I mean, you come out at the end of an operation, just drop your gear off, and then all the gear would be taken away and washed, and you go to your wardrobe and there's a clean uniform hanging up there for you. Generally very honest, the people, no stealing, you could leave anything lying around. Anyway, I left this tin of beans, just probably a 100 gram or something tin of beans on my bed. But I went out on this operation, which was going to be short. And you know, Murphy's Law, if something will happen, it's going to happen. Well, we were there 5 days. No resupply, we couldn't get any rations at all. So I lived on French nougat, which I got from the village. That was the only thing they could sell. And beer la roux. That was the only, you know, other than the stinking water. Because all the water was heavily chlorinated. You got tired of drinking that. So for 5 days I lived on French nougat, which are sickly, you know, toffee thing, and beer la roux. So when we got back, I got to my room, threw my weapon down, threw the gear off, sat on the end of the bed and opened the tin of beans and ate it. And the Yank said to me, "Are you crazy?" He said, "There's meals down the road, you know, what are you eating that rubbish for?" I said, all I could think of, I was starving, that tin of beans, and I ate it. And it tasted lovely. Silly, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you were just focusing on that can of beans.
Tin of beans, all I could think of. I thought, why did I leave it at
So why did it take so long when you thought it was only going to take a couple of hours?
Oh, that's just organisation, I guess. Something I learnt, be prepared. So in future, I always carried extra rations, always, never any foul-ups after that. Good lesson though, I mean it taught me a lot. Don't believe everything you're told, so, and that was the deal.
But why did it take so long? Were you just...
Because they wanted us active in the area, I guess.
Oh.
Had to be continually patrolling that area to keep the enemy off guard, because they were sending in to try and take that particular village over, and we just had to protect that and stop it happening. And that's the reason. But I would have thought that, but that's what I'm saying, you're dealing with commanders who didn't really think of the welfare of people. And the Vietnamese, all right, they carry their rice in their sock, and they eat their sour rice, will kill a chook, and the way it goes, you know. But there weren't that many chooks around for the whole battalion, plus yourself. Naturally, you're at the end of the line. They're all there in the front.
It sounds like you were, you know, one man almost standing alone in really unusual environment.
Well, this was the advisor. This was the way it was. If you had to be on your own at times. It was always nice to have other English-speaking people with you, but it didn't always happen. And that's the beauty of the Australian Army training team. A lot of them were on their own for a lot, but if they had if there were two of them, gave you tremendous support, you know, because you could discuss things in the Australian way. It was good.
Did you learn anything about being in that sort of isolated capacity?
Only don't put yourself there again if possible. That's all. You wouldn't.
Did you actually regret being involved in that sort of episode?
I never regretted anything. I mean, there were times it's a bit hairy. You say, Jesus, what am I doing here? Mug, you know. I suppose there's that way of looking at it, but generally, no. I think our training came to the forefront, and certainly the mental discipline kept you there, and fortunately your physical condition kept you going too. So putting all those things together, you should come out on top.
Did you at least get regular mail when you were there?
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
No. Getting back to that, even when I was took me, when we first arrived in country, this is going back now, we received very little mail. In fact, Senator Paltridge came up to visit, and I drew it to his attention that we could not use the American system, that our mail actually came through the Vietnamese system. And we used to go down to Ninh Hoa from Duc Mae. We'd drive down from Duc Mae to Ninh Hoa and pick up our mail at the Poste Restante Ninh Hoa. That's how was their address. Hold the post at Ninh Hoa. Well, Leslie would write to me quite regularly. And at one time I was in hospital, and the Red Cross came and said, have you got any worries, you know? And I said, well, I haven't heard from my wife for about 8 weeks. And they said, really? And I said, not a word, you know, and I said, we're good, no strained relations or anything like that. I said, I'm just a bit concerned. It wasn't until I got home that Leslie told me that the Red Cross actually went to her and said, have you been playing up? I think, oh, but this was great. I mean, they put it right on the line and said, have you been unfaithful? Your husband hasn't heard from you? What's going on? And I got back that message, I think within a couple of days. Everything was all right. She had been writing, but the whole thing was all held up by the Vietnamese mail. So in one way, by addressing that situation, Senator Paltridge then got us to put our mail through the American system. But I know, Leslie, you know, we couldn't get... Initially we weren't allowed to use the American PX system. We couldn't buy anything through them because we didn't have a card. And I think initially they were reluctant to give cards to foreigners because foreigners, not meaning us, but we were treated as foreigners, would go to a PX, buy, say, a big stereo system, go out in Saigon and flog it. So the Yanks said, no, only nationals will have the PX cards as such. But Leslie sent me a huge box of shaving cream, of razor blades, of deodorant, and quickies. I like quickies. I used to get terrible indigestion. But I never received that, so somewhere there's a Vietnamese somewhere in time who's got a good belly and smells nice. So that was, but it was rectified, and I think that was the turning point for the mail to get it through the American system.
Could you at all make phone calls?
Oh no. The only phone call I made was when I was in R&R in Hong Kong. And we flew from Da Nang to Hong Kong by DC-3 aircraft. Landed in Hong Kong and we'd booked in, I think we were at a Plaza Hotel, I think, in Kowloon. There's an American major and myself and a few other Americans. Anyway, I booked in the hotel. First thing I did was have a beautiful shower, but before I had the shower I rang down. I ordered half a dozen cans of ice cold Fosters and asparagus on ice.
Asparagus?
Yeah, I wanted asparagus on ice. And then I made a telephone call to my wife in Perth, and the first thing she said, "Who you got in the room with you?" Oh, June. I said, "I've just arrived." But a radio telephone in those days, so you'd speak, you'd have to wait for there's a dwell period, then you get an answer. So it's very frustrating. It was a terrible phone call, and I regret making it because it didn't achieve much. It probably upset Leslie and it upset me, because we weren't really saying what we wanted to say. And so I had 5 days in Hong Kong. Bought a big thing of Mikimoto pearls, which she's still got. Paid for a couple of pairs of trousers we made, was so ridiculous. I don't know why I bought them, but they were shocking pants. But generally had a few beers, and then that's what I'm saying. When I met Jock and this American mage, and we just had a few. We used to go out and drink and eat, and then the next minute we're heading back to the country again, Da Nang.
Did you have a choice to come back to Australia?
You could have come back to Australia if you want, but it was a long time, whereas Hong Kong you were there in a few hours, whereas flying back to Australia was a long drag, and for 5 days, not worth it. And I think mentally you're far better off to keep yourself away, I feel, rather than get emotional, get back into a family situation and seeing your 2 boys and then leaving again. I don't think that's fair. So I didn't elect to come back.
Easier to stay away?
I think so, yeah. I thought, yeah.
I know we're coming to the edge of this tape. Are we? Oh, okay. Still got time for another query. So when you came back to Da Nang, was it the same sort of situation that you had before, that you had to keep doing with operations?
Yes, yeah. We still went back to the original unit, the 11 Ranger Battalion.
What was daily life like?
Well, you see, it all depends. Some are very boring. I mean, a lot in war, you just wait. And we would be just waiting for an operation to occur, and then when that occurred, just off you go. And that's the way it was. Da Nang, I was very fortunate. We used to be able to go out to Cape St Jacques and actually buy a lobster and a bottle of Algerian wine, all for $1 American green dollar.
Brilliant.
Oh, superb, absolutely beautiful. I stood on the beach the day in Da Nang, the day the Yanks arrived, the Marines. They did a beach landing. Dinkum. They didn't have to. They all did a beach landing, got wet, and everybody's on the beach. The girls in their our dyes were there, present with I think the Yanks were a bit embarrassed because they come into a war zone and they come on there greeted with garlands of flowers and seeing people clap their hands.
You were standing on the beach?
Oh yes, just when the American Marines arrived, and they were greeted by the dignitaries and the girls in their our dyes, all very attractive women with garlands of flowers, and But then what I'm saying is in Da Nang, where prices used to be quite reasonable, you get good beer 50 cents and feed for $1, you know, without any worries. Everything inflated. So it wasn't the same once the American base, and of course they secured all the airfield in Da Nang because I think they really needed protection then, because if you remember, this was the Marble Mountain, was all this China Beach area, was the Da Nang airfield, and they put in all their the missiles, ground-to-air missiles were all in place. The Hawk, I think they were Hawk missiles, were put in place, and it became a very big fighter base. I mean, the Phantoms were always taking off and flying north from Da Nang, so they attacked the infrastructure from Da Nang.
Did you return to operations?
Beg your pardon?
What operations did you return to?
Well, as you go back to your normal operations for operating from Da Nang and go in the field, as I was saying before, if and as and when you were required. And that's how it was. It was just an ongoing thing. You'd go out, you come back. You go out, come back.
How did you occupy yourself when you weren't out?
Well, there wasn't any sport to be played, nothing like it. You go for a swim, you know, the beach, and just really enjoy food and a couple of drinks, and just spend company with the other members of the team, because in Da Nang we had Australia House, and that was the team house. That's where all Australians would come in from everywhere and spend time. They could sleep there. We all made a contribution towards the Australia House, and there you had a senior warrant officer would organise everything. So you go in there, the beer was cold, you had a shower there if you wanted to, and generally it was mainly for the advisors that operated from outside the town or the city, whereas a lot of us, not a lot of us, but some of us operated from Da Nang itself. But we still enjoyed the hospitality of the house in Da Nang.
What are some of the other incidents that you had in the bush?
Oh, well, just one particular incident of being isolated was a night exercise, well, not an exercise, an operation, but to me it was a bit like an exercise. We were taken south of Da Nang and deployed, and on either side of this road you could see the tracer going either side, firing down the road. So I assumed this was an indicator of our flanks, you know. And the next minute, I know everybody's on a vehicle or on vehicles and going. And I said, well, what's going on? Nobody could tell me what was going on because nobody could speak English. So I just happened to be fortunate enough, I jumped on the rear vehicle and cleared out. The whole mob had just moved and left the area. To hell with your advisor or whoever's supposed to be around, just left completely isolated.
Isn't it?
You all right?
Yeah, I'm trying not to sneeze over you.
Yeah, no, you're all right. So, but that was but generally, it was, as I say, on and off all the time.
What was their discipline like generally?
The Rangers pretty good. You know, they'd certainly willingly take on the enemy. They were not afraid. But I think they just lacked leadership. their commanders were worse than weekend soldiers. I mean, when I've used that term, I'm talking about their weekend. I mean, they'd go home and that was it, and leave their diggers to fend for themselves, and then they come back Monday and say, okay, let's go and fight the war again. Yeah, very much. I think probably the French may have influenced the Vietnamese attitude, because I believe the French used to fight their wars a bit like that. Break off at 5 o'clock and they'll see you the next morning, and then we'll start again and have a go. Certainly when you read about or Street Without Joy, Dinh Bien Phu, the way the Legionnaires were done, you know, a bit sad the way they were isolated and left to, or actually destroyed, or left in, you know, left in disgrace, I suppose, because they weren't given the support to continue the battle.
What happened during the remainder of your time in Vietnam?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It was nothing that than that I've already mentioned. It was just, you'd operate one day, you'd operate 2 days or 3 days, maybe a week. But then you'd come back in and then sit around for a day, sit around for 2 days, and await again and orders to move. And that's all that happened.
When did your tour come to an end?
I think I came, it was April, June, July, maybe July. So I should remember these things. But it's not quite 12 months, it was pretty close to 12 months. And I came back to SAS Regiment and posted to 3 Squadron.
Were you happy to return?
SAS?
Or to return home?
Oh yes, yeah, no, it was great coming home. But the only thing I'm annoyed about, I had a wonderful array of weapons which I was bringing home to take out to the unit to present to SAS for a collection. I had a grease gun, I had a shotgun, I had an M2, I had an M1, and I had a 9mm pistol, and we were briefed in Saigon and told, don't bring any weapons because customs wouldn't allow them in. So I gave away all those weapons bar the shotgun. So I only brought the shotgun home. Unfortunately, I gave that to my brother-in-law on the promise that if he got any ducks, I was to get half the ducks. Never got a duck. And I think that gun was then passed in the amnesty and destroyed. It was registered. I mean, nothing illegal about bringing it, but it was a beautiful Remington pump-action shotgun. Really, I should have kept it myself.
How did you obtain it?
Well, weapons. With the American Special Forces, you go in and select what you like. Have what you like. Anything.
So these are all American issue weapons?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, we're completely, for our weapons, issued from the American system. And yeah, as I say, you acquire weapons. I mean, you could be down at an A camp in Nha Trang, and you could say to the blokes, "Oh, I'd like one of those." Or help yourself. Away you go. All very handy, but good. No, I liked it. But anyway, as I say, I was then posted back to SAS Regiment. And
how were you greeted when you got home?
Oh, very well received. Greeted and told have 5 days leave. I think I was given, and then in another week you've got to go on a course to the east to do a parachute jump instructor's course. So 12 days after I'd arrived home, off I was sent to New South Wales to attend a 6-week course.
Why?
Well, I think they desperately needed parachute jump instructors. SAS itself was probably under pressure. They needed reinforcements for the unit. They needed to put through a lot of people, so therefore they had to enlarge the parachute school as such. And so they allocated tasks to SAS to allocate people to attend similar courses. And I was allocated to attend the PJI course, and as I say, that was a 6-week course. And I attended the course, passed the course with a B pass, which was a very good pass. Harry the Rat Smith, was the OC of the company in Long Tan. He was a fellow student. He just pipped me on the course. We became good friends. He was a very good bloke, but he was awarded the Military Cross for the Battle of Long Tan. That was his company. In a later period after this course, the parachute jump instructors course occurred before he was posted to the infantry battalion as a company commander.
What did you accomplish during the course, or what was the course?
Well, the parachute jump instructor course is where 6 weeks of understanding, being able to put into practice the skills of being a parachute instructor. In other words, you're going to teach people how to parachute. And that's, at the end of the course, you were assessed, or all through the course you were assessed, on your ability as a parachutist, on your ability to instruct, and just on your ability to look after people in general. And I passed the course, as I said, I had a B pass, and did very well, and they were asked if I would remain at the school. And after discussions with Leslie, my wife, we agreed, yes, to accept a posting to RAAF Base Williamtown. And then we moved from Perth to RAAF Base Williamtown. That occurred for 6 months' time. It took about 6 months to do the transition, to get over there and do everything. But I was always there. And so there I stayed until 1969, March 1969.
What were those years like?
Oh, that was enjoyable. RAAF Base Williamtown was very enjoyable. Parachuting was very enjoyable. I mean, every course that you put through was generally about 30 odd people you would be training. Each of those would have to do 8 jumps. Again, as I say, you've clean fatigue with equipment, and then a night descent. And then they would be passed on to SAS. The whole, and we did other courses as well. No, it was an interesting time, and it was there one of the pupils to come on board and do a parachute course was a flight lieutenant, and he was a young bloke, a very bright young fella, and he said to me, he was allocated my stick, the stick being the unit of men that you train. He came up to me and said, "I've got to pass this course." And I said, "Yeah, well, if you want to pass this course, I want a flight in a Mirage aircraft." And he said, "If I pass this course, I'll get you a flight in a Mirage fighter." Well, he was brilliant. He didn't have any worries. He was going to pass anyway. And then one day he rang up and said, "You ready? We're going for a hop." So I went over, I briefed, put on all the good gear for the flight and had an hour and a quarter in a Mirage fighter, and it was absolutely marvellous. Wonderful feeling. And if I was young enough or smart enough, that was the thing, I would have taken up flying. It was absolutely superb.
Whereabouts was your office in Melbourne?
Melbourne.
Whereabouts?
Yes. Yeah, I can't tell you that. It was in, well, yes, I can, I suppose. No, I can't, because it was in St Kilda Road. St Kilda Road, Melbourne. Do you need to know?
Well, the protesters are out the front, so I presume
what?
it was... There are protesters out the front, so I
Yeah,
presume
but
it
they
was public
didn't,
knowledge.
no, not public. Yeah, they knew it was a defence establishment, but they didn't know who it was. That's what I'm saying. It's okay, they can say, yes, people work in defence, but who are they? Navy, Army, Air Force? They were just protesters. Long, dirty, unwashed bastards that you wouldn't put a bucket of water over if you... they made me very angry. Anyway, but no, it was in St Kilda Road, Melbourne. That's where I began my career with the Australian Secret Intelligence Service.
So your office was in a defence establishment. Should we just pause there?
Well, as I say, I was interviewed with Harvey Barnett. Harvey was an ex-school teacher from Scotch College here in Perth. Very much an intellectual, but a very nice bloke indeed. Well, he was my initial boss, first up. My role was because of my background as a Special Air Service, and I was the first Special Air Service soldier to be recruited by ACES. I was the first Australian. They had two other people there on the Special Operations side, but they were English. And they were probably running out of puff and running out of breath, so they dearly wanted within the Special Operations side, as training officers, new blood. And that's why I was recruited. Initially, we used to deal with, we would train people. That was my role as a trainer.
Civilians?
Civilians, military officers, naval officers, Air Force officers, and civilians. Not only did I train from the Special Operations side, but I also trained from the intelligence side, that is with secret writing and contacts, procedures, really the spy game itself we would impart to our people. And in my side I could be sent anywhere to train other people to be industrial sabotage, demolitions, weapon training, parachuting, infiltration by submarine, again infiltration by air as I'm saying, parachuting, and infiltration by road, any method of all to achieve the aim. Now, as such, all the explosive, different types of weapons, we always threw at these people and trained them with, so they had a lot of scope. I mean, training for special operations doesn't vary much today. That is the organisation of guerrilla warfare, insurgency, much which is going on in Iraq today. Similar situations that we would like to train people for in the years to come if necessary. And we could create the same pandemonium and fear among the local inhabitants as what is being done in Iraq. We would operate similar, except we don't cut heads off. We're not like that. We're far more clinical, I suppose, rather than go along and do awful, terrible things like that.
Orthodox.
Yeah, but we would operate, as I say, from submarines. We always had access to submarines. We had access to flights. Whenever we required things, it was always supplied. I was very fortunate. I was sent to England for 6 months. I spent 6 months in England training with MI6, and in some ways they are very, very good. But I think the Russians too are very, very good. Well, they were. I don't know what they are today. I've been out of it for a while. The Americans, they didn't trust the Brits. The Brits don't trust the Americans. The Yanks seem to trust us, and the Brits sometimes trust us. So I don't say, whether we're getting all the right information. So even the turmoil today going on within the intelligence community, it may be a bit fractured at time to time.
What is the atmosphere generally like in the intelligence community?
Well, you've got probably different people. I mean, you've got the intellectuals. You've got to have the intellectuals. You've got to have these people that can interpret and think above the normal plane rather than the basic. I mean, in the level of the intelligence world, I'm a practical individual. I'm not the theorist or the interpretation of what's going on. I just get supplied with that interpretation, do the training and move on. The actual, these days, I suppose a lot is fed in the computer and they come up with some answers which may be right and probably a lot that aren't right. But what I'm saying, having gone to England, I was very fortunate. I met head of the British Secret Service. I had 20 minutes with him, Sir Maurice Oldfield, and he liked Australians and gave full support. No, they didn't hold much back. When I arrived there, I was given another name, and I did training there, and all sorts of aspects of training, from navigating big watercraft such as a 50, 60 foot motor vessel, down to canoes, launching from submarines, very much similar to commando work, but specifically tied to just working as a civilian as such. And
under what circumstances were you training these people yourself? When you'd be called in to train individuals, under what circumstances or in what facilities?
well, you could, in some circumstances, for example, in the secret writing, we had a chap that was going into a foreign country. He couldn't use his radio, but he could write. So I taught him how to use different applications for secret writing. And then we'd send him away to another country and he would write to me, and I would again print or clear the writing, and then again, this was all part of the training side, correct him where things had to be corrected until we got him right. And then he was dispatched to a country, and I don't even know which country he went to, but that was the letter, just secret writing. Photography, we would train them in photography, miniature photography, how to really do the best job when taking photographs of documents, that sort of thing. Looking after oneself and how to use your protection, self-protection. And I'm glad to see that they're now, ACES is allowed to carry the weapons. It was only after that debacle the Sheraton debacle, which fortunately was after my time, that the world caved in on the special operations side from the Sheraton incident. But generally, as I said to you, we train people from all walks of life, and did a good job.
What kind of relationship would you have with those people?
Oh, good. Oh, socially, anything, you know. It was a good relationship because they grow to trust you and you're teaching them all the aspects, different aspects. I mean, when you're teaching people explosives and how to use them, homemade explosives, for example, how to go down to your local hardware store and gather all the gear and come home and make a bomb, yes. We have all that, and I hope today that it's still in place.
So would you know their actual identity, and what sort of facilities would you be instructing them in?
Oh yes, we would carry that training out from a base. We had a firm base, and that training was done under secure conditions, so everything was done properly. And generally, most people went away pretty happy.
Did you get to know their actual identity, or were their identities
Oh
protected?
yes, some people, yes, I certainly knew who they were, but others, no. It's always worked on a need-to-know basis. And if you don't need to know, well, there's no need for you to know. So that's good.
What kind of atmosphere does that create when you're developing these kinds of
I
relationships?
know if you're known as John Cross to me, you'll always be John Cross to me. And if you're going to Ireland, when in fact you're probably going somewhere else, I say John Cross has gone to Ireland. I don't have to know. Doesn't matter, does it? As long as the end result's there of what we need to achieve. But anyway, as I say, there were very fruitful years. It was a wonderful time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Nearly 8 years there with the service as such. And was only to become a bit tired that I decided that I would give it away, and that's what I did. And we moved. Fortunately, we previously bought a block of land in Perth, this one, and we decided to move, even though our both boys went to Xavier College in Melbourne. We thought the move may benefit them, so I brought them over and we sent them to the Jesuit College here. I've got 2 sons now, Mark, Brendan, and it was probably not a wise move in the end because we sometimes regret leaving Melbourne. We probably would have been better off staying in Melbourne, continuing with service as such, because when I got back here, I couldn't get a job. I applied to different security firms, but I couldn't even get an interview.
I don't suppose you could have put ASIS on your resume?
No, I couldn't put ACES on the... But I did say I had some experience, very good experience, with the security side, and that I had SAS experience as well. But people didn't want to know. There was a jealousy there that, you know... I went to one interview, this was a chub, for God's sake. The name of the bloke to conduct the interview was Tony Thorp. I introduced myself as Tony Thorp. He thought I was taking the mickey out of him. Thought I was a setup. And I didn't get past first base. So I ended up working up the local brickworks for a while as a tradesman assistant. Dirty, yeah, pretty messy job. Then I became storeman. And then finally we got our own business, and that was a good little business.
What sort of business did you enter
It was
into?
polyurethane foam spraying. We had marvellous years with sealing grain silos, chicken sheds insulation, piggeries. I had a couple of blokes who worked for me. I didn't spray myself, bugger that. But they worked for us, and it was a good business, and we sold it about 5 years ago. And then I'm retired. I play golf twice a week, much to my wife's enjoyment. She doesn't really like me going off, but I do. And we have a pretty happy retirement. So that's the story of my life.
Did you discuss anything about your Vietnam experience when you came back, or did that come much later?
No, I don't think we said very much at all. I don't remember discussing with anybody. The only thing is that when I was at the school, at one course of commandos at the parachute school, we had a course of commandos come through, and they wanted to know, they were CMF soldiers, they wanted to know what was going on in Vietnam and what my thoughts were. But generally, no. A lot of your mates said, what was it like? And you'd say, yeah, we'll go, it's worthwhile, you know, and you can save some money perhaps. And yeah, generally, but it's experience. And to be honest, I think all soldiers, all sailors, all airmen, for that, always look for a war service. I mean, to go through a career in the military and not seen some action or done some foreign service, you haven't achieved much. And I think you'd say, yes, there's something lacking. But having gone and done overseas service, yeah, it's good.
How surprising was it for you to experience the backlash that resulted out of the whole Vietnam conflict with civilians in Australia?
Look, I really think it was a propaganda machine. In analysing it from my perspective, I honestly believe they had, the North Vietnamese had the best propaganda machine that I've ever seen. And these fools like Cairns, Jim Cairns, who was a traitor, and people want to remember that Cairns, the politician, the so-called treasurer of our Labor government here when they were in, he was a traitor. He sided with the enemy. He should have been shot. But people like that went along with the fellow travellers and put all this propaganda out about how the Australian public generally supported us, supported our troops, and they weren't anti. It was only the few dickwits in our society, the one that threw the paint over that commanding officer. She should have been thrown in jail and still be kept in jail. You know, throwing paint over a soldier. What a disgrace. But the politician let her get away with it. They're gutless. No guts. You know, and when I ask people, I remember we're in Bali on a holiday some time ago, and came up about Vietnam, and I said, yes, I was in Vietnam, and they, well, the Yanks lost the war. The Yanks didn't lose the war, they withdrew. But I said, how do you know? They said, well, see that tank coming through the presidential palace. That was the end of the Yanks in Vietnam. I said, well, isn't that strange that that actual footage of that tank coming through the gate happened 2 years after the Yanks had left? And people don't know that. So it just shows they're fools, the propaganda machine was still working. No, the average person was very supportive. I had never received any garbage from anybody, and well, I wouldn't have taken it anyway. But most of the people I've associated with dismissed it as infertile propaganda. Does that answer the question?
It certainly does.
I got a bit emotional, I'm sorry.
That's okay, you can get emotional, you're allowed. Were you surprised that the Americans decided to pull out of Vietnam?
I know, I think it was the way Nixon was performing. It had to happen. I mean, the corruption within South Vietnam, and even today, corruption right throughout Vietnam as such, and you've been there, you know that. It's a society. And I think the French influence there as well is still corrupt. They give good food, but it's corrupt. No, I wasn't surprised. The Yanks had to get out. But it wasn't. They didn't defeat. You know, if you read a book called Unheralded Victory, it's written by an American who lived in Australia, and I think he joined up by the Australian Navy. He became a lieutenant commander. He wrote this book, Unheralded Victory. I forget his name. But in it, it states quite clearly, not one major action were the Americans or their allies defeated. Not one. And yet the propaganda machine talks about how they won the battle. The bastards didn't win one. And, you know, it makes me angry when people talk about them winning or the Yanks losing. The Yanks didn't lose, they just withdrew.
From some of the fellows who we've talked to who are ex-SAS, there seems to be a very sort of tight-knit group of men. You know, even though it was tight grip back then, it's still tight-knit now. Do you find that that's a special kind of thing going on?
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate because I'm now a life member of the SAS Association. I was very privileged they made me that. And from time to time I asked to go and talk to the new members of the unit. They're all young, fit, bright, far brighter, I'm sure, than what we were. But Swanbourne is like like a family, yeah? And that's what it is.
What do you get out of having that contact with some of the younger blokes that are coming up through the ranks?
Well, they probably, when you go there, they probably say, they're silly old farts, you know. You know, the old bastards, what would they know? And I think that's what happened. I mean, we went to the brilliant parade just a few weeks ago, where the regiment was given the streamers for their action in Afghanistan, and we arrived there, I think, at 10:30 in the morning, and we left there at 11 o'clock that night, and we're just enjoying the company of the new young blokes. No, they treat us really with a lot of respect. I'm just saying, because what we began, they are continuing, and they're doing it very well, exceptionally well.
Do you think it's actually improved over the years?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, their equipment, wonderful. Oh, you give an eyeful. Beautiful gear. I mean, their radio gear. When I first started in the company, we used to lug around 24-volt batteries as hard as hell, you know, going up Yarmouth mountains and carrying bloody, how the hell do you fight a war with that? We used to think, geez, wouldn't it be lovely to have something lightweight? Then we got little radios, that big. Then we got other little radios, that big. But now they got little radios. Gear, sophisticated gear. They're weapons. I mean, wonderful weapons. When you read of their action in Iraq, where that young soldier, trooper, he was awarded the Medal of Courage. I mean, firstly, he launched his missile He was on the vehicle, launched his missile, took out the mortar kit. The whole mortar, he took that out with one shot. The missile went up, looked down and bang. Then picked up his rifle, his sniper rifle, knocked off other people, put that down, went back to another missile, fired again. Wonderful. I mean, these are the weapons these blokes have got. And when they hit hard. No. But it's all from transition. And if we hadn't have started it, I mean, a lot of people, when SAS was first started, a lot of people didn't want it. They were anti it. There's still people today, acquaintances that I know, that despise SAS.
Why?
They're jealous. They're jealous because the flexibility that SAS has as compared with other units, just tremendous. They're all thinkers. They think and do the job properly. No, SAS, touch wood, will always be here. A marvellous unit, wonderful.
What do you usually do on Anzac Day?
March with the training team. Because at the present time, or the last 4 years, I've been the president of the Australian Army Training Team Vietnam Association, WA branch. So really, as much as I like to march with SAS, I'm obliged to march with the training team. Unfortunately, we've just had our AGM, so I've been for another year because people don't put their hands up. And we just wanted to go. We have our 45th anniversary will be in 2007, so we'll probably have to stay as president because, as I say, nobody puts up their hand. Just keep the people we've got that are dying off, mind you, we lose people every year. We have to keep that focused on our reunion on the 45th because we had a marvellous reunion for our 40th. The WA branch ran the 40th here in Perth. We conducted it from Fremantle. People came from all over the world to it and said it was the best organised show that they've ever had, and it was. It was just marvellous. We started with a cocktail party, so with a memorial service, we had a formal dinner and finished up with a barbecue at the Special Air Service Regiment. Just wonderful. But again, as I say, we stay focused, and perhaps, if God willing, in 2007 will be the 50th anniversary of SAS Regiment, or SAS company, now regiment, and I'll be able to go there for that, if everything's all right.
What do you think you gained most out of being associated with the SAS?
I met my wife through it. Yeah, we've been married now. We've got, I think, 44 years coming up. 45, 46, or something like that. 1959 we were married on the 5th of December, so I'm right, I don't remember that. And Leslie's birthday is the 4th of December. Mine's the 27th of November, so it's 1 week. So all those things are together. No. Made a lot of friends, good friends, had disagreements, some regrets on not achieving aims that I could have or should have, but generally just to be greeted now and, you know, by everybody as generally a friend. I mean, we have golf days, good days at the association. The association's a wonderful association. We've got a marvellous establishment there at the house in Campbell Barracks that was given to the SAS Association by the regiment, but we've got always informed by the regiment what's going on, keeping abreast of situations and training methods. No, it's first class. We're the old men now, of course. Yeah. Once we were warriors. Yeah.
Oh, you still are in your own way.
Yeah.
Tony, thanks so much for talking to us today. We've really enjoyed spending the day with you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Our pleasure.